الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله ذي الملك والملكوت ذي العزة والجبروت. الحمد لله حي قيوم لا ينام، عزيز لا يضام، قهار لا يرام. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. O you believe, fear Allah as He should be feared, and die not except on the state of Islam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most merciful, bestow upon us the gift to die on the state of Islam. Allahumma ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Amma ba'd. يقول الباري سبحانه وتعالى بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم في سورة الأنفال: واتقوا فتنة لا تصيبن الذين ظلموا منكم خاصة. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this ayah warning the believer to shield themselves from a trial, from a fitna. قال لا تصيبن الذين ظلموا منكم خاصة. It will not only affect the wrongdoers among you who has caused this fitna, but if He's going to strike, the consequences of it will strike everyone, the wrongdoers and those who were not involved in it. And this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warning us from al-fitan. And al-fitan are the trials. But the trial here, into linguistic meaning, al-fitnatu means the test, the trial, the tribulation, and so on. However, it has different meaning, depends on the context in which the word is used, or in which sentence, or in context. Here, al-fitnatu, it has more talking about the fitna and its consequences, and the way how the believer should, stand, against the fitna, or deal with the fitna. But the fitna, what it caused a disrupt into the body of the believers, creeping in among them, differences, bringing, in a way, making people to be fearful, being cautious, and all this disrupt and causing the instability of the body of the Muslims. Why? Because of this fitna. And one of its aspects that really leads to division, one of its aspects that really cause an imbalance in the psychological, aspect, and it's really inflame, those impulses. Why? Because when someone is under trial, or someone is hurt, or there is differences, what happen, this fitna will cause is inflaming those impulses. There's within us, in our nafs, there's these forces. There's the forces of anger, forces of desire, that only with the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that a person can manage them in a balanced way. But in the time of the fitna, the person loses their compass, and by losing the compass, a person will have this imbalance into their psychological aspect. They have unsettled into these forces of the nafs. So the forces of the soul, instead of helping a person to be firm, persevering, and under the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no, it's causing, the disrupt is causing a person to be going wild, to be going violent. Why? Because the fitna, what it does, it inflames this aggressive aspect, this aggressive impulses that leads a person, to hatred, to having grudge against others, to love to retaliate or plan to retaliate. Or it might be also the fitna, its cause, it's like the desire. And when it's a desire, what is going to happen is also going to stir these impulses of desires, was making a person seeking to fulfill what they desire. And this is all the aspect of the fitna that we are talking about. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, shield yourself, be aware from the fitna that caused by some of you, but the consequences will strike everyone. And this is one of the evidence that the enjoying good and forbid evil is a necessity, and it is an obligation into the Muslim community or between the Muslim each others. And of course the advice of the Prophet ﷺ said, it is the deen. So he ﷺ summarized the whole religion, the whole faith in advice, قال الدين النصيحة. Now, knowing the aspect of the fitna and knowing, the obligation to shield ourselves from the fitna. So how someone is going to know the fitna? The fitna is anything that will disrupt your peace inside, that you really make it like unsettled your balance. That's a fitna. Why? Because the closer you are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more comfort you have. The closer you are to Allah, the more peace and tranquility you have. Therefore, if you do not have that peace and tranquility, you are going to go through a fitna. So the fitna here is, the problem is how to deal with it. It's either someone will embrace it or someone will strive to, push it away. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in many ayat defining for us the fitna. But before coming to the meaning of the fitna, or what are the different aspects, how this fitna will be manifested, one will be what is first the cause of this fitna. Why we are, having this fitna, because we're not talking about here the trials that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that He will inflict this type of trial, or all the type of trial is either in one's health, in one's money, in one's family, in one's crops and so on. Fear is all of that a way for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to cleanse the believer and to purify the believer. But here we're talking about the impact of the fitna on the nafs. And the fitna that is someone will willingly adhere to it. That is the problem. It's not the fitna or the trial that someone will befall of them. So there is difference between the trial, which is al-bala or al-ibtila, and the fitna that we are talking about. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the context of this ayah. So something that make you unsettled, something that really take away your peace, something that make you to be suffocating, to be in distress, that is the fitna. That is the fitna we're talking about. So what is the first cause of the fitna? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specified in the ayah before. The first cause is our shortcoming in responding to Allah and His Messenger, to that which give us life. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the ayah before it, He said, "O you who believe, respond to the call of Allah and His Messenger, to that which give you life." قال يا أيها الذين آمنوا استجيبوا لله ورسوله. Answer, respond to Allah and His Messenger, submit to them, run toward them to fulfill what they are commanding you when they call you to that which give you life. So whatever Allah and the Messenger is calling you for, to submit to fulfill, to implement, all of it, that's what gives you life. Therefore, our shortcoming in responding to Allah and to His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that's the origin of the fitna. That's the origin of the fitna. So the fitna in our shortcoming in doing such a thing. For this reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most merciful, ordained us to always be in a state of fleeing to Allah. فَفِرُّوا إِلَى اللَّهِ. Because every time you are in a situation when you run and you flee to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will get you into fortress. So He'll protect you and safeguard you and preserve you. But when someone is dealing with their fitna and they are into the event, they will not be thinking of Allah for many reasons, and we're going to mention some of them. So this is the origin of the fitna. Now, the next question, what is the fitna? How the fitna will really manifest in our life? The fitna, everything around you is fitna. Everything around you is fitna. Everything. Only when you treat it with the guidance of Allah becomes a helper for you in your journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But as your first step, everything. Your own soul is a fitna. As the Prophet ﷺ said, the self that between your two sides is your worst enemy to you. Your children are a fitna. Your family is a fitna. Your ahl is a fitna. Your money is a fitna. Your wealth is a fitna. The study you do, everything around you, surrounding you is a fitna. Therefore, if you reflect, dear brother, respected sister, you only have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your life. There's only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is there to help you. He is there to elevate you. He is there to provide you the peace that everybody else is looking for. You have only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, knowing such a thing, come to see in some ayat in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, do not betray Allah and His Messenger and betray your own trust. And then He said, and know that your own children and your own wealth are a fitna, are a trial that would divert you. He said, O you who believe, قَالَ لَا تُلِيكُمْ, do not let your wealth, your money, your children, your businesses divert you from the remembrance of Allah. And whoever does such a thing, he is a loser. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, indeed from your own spouses, from your own children are enemies to you. فَحْذَرُوهُمْ, be aware from them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put you in a situation to understand everything around you is a fitna. Everything. Now when you know such a thing, and you have yaqeen, a certainty that you're answering to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those fitna around you, you're going to turn them, you're going to convert them to helper to you. You're going to convert them into a source of a blessing to you. And you being a source of a blessing to them. And this is, but in the first step is to be warning yourself from the fitna, to not fall into it. The next step, to ask someone how someone can easily fall into fitna. How someone can easily, his money becomes his own fitna. An idea, an ideology, that he's someone, bewitched by this ideology, bewitched by the program and by the promises. That's the ideology. They think this is good for them. So they will, in a way, defending, advocating for this ideology. That's the biggest fitna. That's the biggest fitna. Therefore, the first step, it is those forces we have. If it's an anger force, these aggressive impulses, a blind will be standing and advocating for example, an ideology, or for a habit that the person wants to justify. Or is this a desire, those forces of desire, like pushing a person to realize or to implement or to achieve something that they hope to have. All of that make a person to be blind, subhanallah. So that first step, being driven by these blind forces, make a person to adhere to a fitna without knowing. Not without knowing that they are adhering to, without knowing the consequences of those fitna. Now when someone is getting into that, someone will ask, subhanallah, how these people they manage, or the shaitan manage to submit such people or such a group or such a whole nation, subhanallah. Sometimes you see in the revolution people all go and adhering to one idea. So how come one idea, everyone will submit to it? Everyone will follow this ideology. And you can read in history how these things happen. It's very simple, subhanallah. Why? Because it's innate in us to love the change. Everyone loves the change. And loving the change for a better situation. And this love of the change innate in us, its foundation is our love to great, let's say virtues, great values, the value of freedom. So when a program tells you, said, we're going to give you more freedom, the heart will, subhanAllah, adhere, is attached to it. We're going to give you freedom. We're going to give you social justice. We're going to give you equality. We're going to give you more provision. We're going to give you all what you are thinking. The thing that is in nature, you love it by nature. When people invade us through this system, through this way. Look in the commercial. All the commercial is based on beautifying the thing that you already love. So they will, subhanAllah, hand people, they will attach them to their product or to their system or to their way or to their ideas through invading us from that aspect that we already love. You find people loving, heroes, that they call them heroes. Why? Because they make them to be like people who are saving the world. So these people are hero, people who love the good. But you see in their reality or in their, conduct, even in this, script that they put, there are people who, subhanAllah, far from Allah, who are doing all what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made haram. But people, they love them. Why? Because it's already innate in them to love of the brave person, to love of the generosity, the love of the freedom, the love of, salvation is innate in us. So this has become so easy for a whole nation, for a whole group to submit to an idea that is sakhima, an ill, sick idea, but people are fully mobilized with it because they're tricked. Because they're tricked. And the fact is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us about the system of the shaitan. He told us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in the Quran that Iblis has a promise that he will lead them astray, that he will command them to even change their own creation. And you see it, subhanAllah, today, those surgery who's, subhanAllah, mutilating a whole body, that was from the promise of the shaitan from the beginning of the creation. قَالَ وَلَأُمُرَنَّهُمْ فَلَيُغَيِّرُنَّ خَلْقَ اللَّهِ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, who takes the shaitan as an ally, an ideology they love, and something they adhere to it, what is going to happen? He's going to lose all his life. قَالَ يَعِدُهُمْ. He promised them, and he give them like high hopes. وَمَا يَعِدُهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ إِلَّا غُرُورًا. But these promises are all delusion. These promises are all delusion. Now, the most important in this, aspect, ask yourself, okay, someone out there to fitna, he loves something and he get to it and he immersed into it. Say, immersing into this aspect that you love, which is in reality that Allah called fitna, what it has as, or what does this fitna yet that you adhere to has as impact in your heart. Listen to a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم تعرض الفتن على القلوب كعرض الحصير عودا عودا. The fitan, this trial, this fitan is presented to the heart like the mat. The mat, he said, straw by straw. You see a person when, sleep on a mat, on the hard mat, they will have like traces of the straw on their side. So this is Prophet ﷺ given us this parable. So the fitna comes to the heart and it make a mark in it. And this mark is either the believer, so there is two aspects. قال عودا 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 عودا. فمن أشربها, whoever who absorb it is going to cause a black mark into the heart. And قال ومن أنكرها, and whoever who rejected is going to have a white mark on the heart. Till this heart becomes like a gemstone, pure. No fitna will harm them as long as the heaven and the earth remain. The other heart who's been accumulating this fitan, absorbing them till it becomes all dark. When it's dark, قال يصبح أسودا, it becomes like dark, black, ramadi, dusty. قال كالكوز مغشية, it's like the vessel, overturned vessel. And this is a great parable if you reflect on it. So the heart was absorbing all this fitan, the fitan of the money, the fitan of the desire, the fitan of ideology, the fitan of advocating for things that they think is going to change the world, but it does not have any foundation in the system of Allah. Therefore, it is only delusion. And this is the truth of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. All this fitan absorbed by the heart, it turns, subhanAllah, very dark, black. قال أسودا كالكوز مغشيا, is like the vessel. And when you put a vessel, overturn it, which is mean, like you empty it from all the knowledge, you empty it from all the good values, you empty it from the moral. And then he will not be able to accept, when an overturned vessel, you cannot pour in it anything. So he will not be able to accept a reminder or to accept the light of guidance. But he's going to be guided. The inside is under the control of the desire. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ, قال لا يعرف معروفا, he will not know any good thing. He will not be able to know any good thing, وَلَا يُنْكِرُ مُنْكَرًا, and even will not be able even to reject any evil. Why? Because his heart being absorbed all this fitan that it make to corrupt the whole perception, so they cannot see only through their desire. They only see through this perception. Which is lead, dear brother, respected sister, for such a heart, to be far from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to have a corrupted perception. Why? In the first place, this person didn't take or has aware of the fitna. And this fitna that called the disrupt, this fitna that caused the distress, this fitna that caused the anguish, this fitna that caused the fear. And subhanAllah, you see them people, when it's about the money, is all fearing poverty. When it's about the position, is all fearing to lose it. If they don't have it, is all craving to have it. And they have filled with envy and jealousy. So it's unsettled situation. It's a situation that rip the heart apart and divide this person and make them, subhanAllah, a person not even good and pleasant to be with them. Why? Because they've been consumed by the fitna. They become in a cage of this fitna that they adhere willingly to it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is warning us, fir ilallah, fir ilallah. Your own children and your own mother and your own father, in the day of judgment, you run from each other. Today, your responsibility in how to make the closest to you source of barakah to you and you source of barakah to them. But you're going to say, oh my children, I'm going to give them the best education, and you pour the money and you do everything and you don't even think how to make them muttaqeen, how to make us righteous. Those children, they're going to be the tool to punish you in the future. The same. Why? Because you make them, instead of a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you dealt with them as a tool, as a joy, as a toy. So they're going to be your punishment coming from them. The same for money, the same for politics, the same from any aspect when it does not have any foundation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How can a person can shield themselves from such a fitan? The first thing is to look at yourself. If you have, such, tight heart, tight nafs, know that you are going through the fitna. Because a believer will not be able to be in a situation always suffering. That's not a believer. Always suffering, you are submitted. You are in a cage of a trial. You are in a cage of a fitna that you are there to it willingly, subhanallah. Then the next step, to know these forces that direct you, these forces of anger, these forces, the aggressive impulses, this desire. If you do not manage them with the guidance of Allah, then you are imprisoned, a prisoner of these forces. Now, when you look at the first step that someone need to treat is when the fitna is embraced, when the fitna is adhered to, is going to cause a disrupt into your priorities. And that's, subhanAllah, the first thing that the believer needs to be aware of. And this is how, when you are mindful of such a thing, then you go to combat the fitna. Then you're going to free yourself from this fitna. Then you're going to truly and with sincerity and devotion flee to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The overturn of the priorities becomes like what is your priority in your day. In your order of precedence, you're going to find the money for the person who loves the money. The one are going to find the studies and the diplomas for the student. You're going to find the position for the one who's in corporate. You're going to find the, politics or high position in politics, or, their party, they need to win and things for those who their heart is filled with politics. And when you have such priority, then you know that you are imprisoned into the fitna. Why? Because simply the priority of the believer need to submit to Allah. The priority of the believer need to be the closest to Allah every day. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, if a day after day you don't do any improvement in your relation with Allah, you are someone misfortune. You are someone like disgrace. قَالَ مَغْبُونٌ ابْنُ آدَمَ مَغْبُونٌ. Therefore, if you do not make your priority is your nearness to Allah, and everything else will come under it. That's how you're going to bring barakah to your life. And this will lead that when you treat the fitan, anything that is going to be, presented to you, first present it to the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It has a foundation. If you can trim it, if you can filter it, if you can purify it, then adhere it to it through the guidance of Allah, that you're going to be helper to you. Your children, they're going to be source of your blessing when your focus is to make it righteous before they get all the diplomas. That's the most important. If a child is really successful in their studies, but they do not pray, you must have a problem. Because that child is a fitna for you. the same for the spouse, the same for everything, the same for your parents. And this is how to present every aspect in your life, that it might be a source of blessing, but also a source of distraction of the blessing. That's when they become a fitna. This is how, when you put it under the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is one of the interpretation in the Quran of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَتَّخِذُ مِنْ دُونِ اللَّهِ أَنْدَادًا. From among people who take other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they love them and they put them equal to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The fitan is exactly this ayah. Because people, they love things as much as they love Allah and more. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala قال وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَشَدُّ حُبًّا لِلَّهِ. And the believers, they are the strongest in the love to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because Allah is their priority. They know they only have Allah to help them, Allah to provide them, Allah to care about them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to elevate them, to purify them. And when you know such a thing, anything needs to come under the structure of loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If not, a person will be, when he will not have the priorities set right, he's going to be in the day of judgment biting on his hand, wishing that he followed the Prophet ﷺ. وَيَوْمَ يَعَضُّ الظَّالِمُ عَلَى يَدَيْهِ يَقُولُ يَا لَيْتَنِي اتَّخَذْتُ مَعَ الرَّسُولِ سَبِيلًا. يَا لَيْتَنِي وَيْلَتَى لَيْتَنِي لَمْ أَتَّخِذْ. Woe to me, I wish I didn't have taken so and so as a friend to show me all the tips how making money. But what it led me to a friend or a system or an ideology to help me think that I'm going to be a great person. But what it led me to the distraction, to fall into the delusion, to pure failure. And that's not the path of the believer. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على النبي المصطفى أما بعد. If we just realize everything around you is a fitna, and this is a fact, this is a reality, and in dealing with the guidance of Allah, holding fast to Allah, fleeing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are able to convert every fitna around you to be a means for you to paradise and for those you're dealing with them. For this reason comes al-wala wal-bara. Al-wala wal-bara is that aspect to only befriend those who are going to help you to get to the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You and your family, you become bridge to each other to the Jannah, because all of you, you want to be in the highest abode in paradise. You're making dua for each other. You're making dua together. Therefore, you're going to treat the fitna as being converted to be kind of refined under the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the most beautiful thing, when you do this striving, when you do this effort, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help you and put you in this fortress. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when the disbeliever tried to kind of make the Prophet to say things that to please them, to incline to them, and he refused, of course. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down in the Quran, he said, قَالَ وَلَوْلَا أَن ثَبَّتْنَاكَ. Had it not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have you to be firm, you might have inclined to them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches with that we have weakness, but this weakness can be saved, can be preserved, can be, strengthened by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if we just make the first step to help ourselves, to deny, to reject the fitna. But if we are not aware of such a thing, if we are not, we really, unmindful of such a thing, then we're going to become prisoner to this fitan. And when you become prisoner to this fitan, you become totally different person. You are not the believer that you know. You are a totally different person, because you cannot even make the difference between what is good and what is bad. That's how bad it is. And we should know that everything you do is going to be followed by a test. It's going to be followed by a difficulty. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves the believer. Yunus alayhi salam, when he left his people without the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah put him in a very severe trial. He was trapped into the stomach of the whale. And subhanallah, the only thing that helped Yunus is a fleeing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قال لولا أنه كان من المسبحين. If he was not from those who celebrated the praises of Allah, he will have stayed in the stomach of the whale till the day of judgment, which will mean like that stomach of the whale is going to be his grave, and he will be resurrected from there. But he was from the musabbihin, which Allah teaching us, whenever you have a problem, whenever you are, subhanAllah, being feel imprisoned, inclined to a fitna that is going to divert you from the remembrance of Allah, that is going to cause the overturn of your precedence, is going to cause the overturn of your priority, making Allah to be the lowest into your list, then flee to Allah to help you, to preserve you, to protect you, to put you in fortress, and then He will elevate you. And as soon as Allah is with you, you're going to feel that comfort, and that is the sign. That is the sign that you are with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, rejecting the fitna with all your force. أقول نسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن يجعلنا من عباده المتقين وأن يقينا من الفتن. اللهم قنا من الفتن يا أرحم الراحمين. نعوذ بك من كل الفتن، نعوذ بك من فتنة المحيا والممات، ومن فتنة عذاب القبر، ومن فتنة المسيح الدجال. اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا أجمعين وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. اللهم يا رب العالمين ويا أرحم الراحمين ارحم إخواننا في غزة وفلسطين والشام والسودان. اللهم ارحمهم برحمتك، اللهم احفظهم بحفظك، اللهم أفرغ عليهم صبرا وثبت أقدامهم وانصرهم على المعتدين المجرمين. إنك على كل شيء قدير وبالإجابة جدير. نعم المولى ونعم النصير. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. وأقم الصلاة يرحمكم الله.